Okay. I think folks will continue to stream in, but we want to respect your time. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Sean, one of the team members at Madison. My colleague Jonathan is the man of the hour. But I just wanted to kind of text on this for 90 seconds and then kind of let him run with things. The goal today is to dig into what some of the current state best practices are for getting engagement on LinkedIn and maximizing reach. But there is a major caveat that we feel compelled to append to the beginning of this. And that is just that we want to be students of the algorithm without necessarily being slaves to the algorithm, if that makes any sense. And I don't think that there's anything that you're going to see in here that is cringeworthy or that would make you uncomfortable necessarily. I think a lot of it is kind of tweaking around the margins. But that said, we mostly care about consistency and authenticity and that you show up with your best ideas over time. And we just believe that that's the best way to build trust with the people that you're trying to serve. And so if there is anything that Jonathan covers in here where you're thinking to yourself, I don't know if I would feel comfortable doing that sort of thing, then don't do it. And I myself, there are things that I know would theoretically increase my reach a little bit, but it requires me to show up in a certain way. And I just refuse to do that. And so I would encourage you kind of as you're thinking through this, be open-minded, ask yourself like, hey, how could I maybe apply that principle to increase the effectiveness of what it is that I'm trying to do. But again, if anything strikes you a little bit too aggressive or whatever, just makes you uncomfortable for whatever reason. If you think it's going to be an impediment to you hitting the publish button, then take what's useful and disregard the rest. And like I said, what we mostly care about is that you have a long-term view of things and that you have a principle. You approach it with a principled generosity and just sharing your best thinking with consistency. And I believe that if you do that, you'll get results. So enough preamble with that. I'm going to go on mute and I'm going to let Jonathan run with things. So thanks again for being here.
All right. Thank you, Sean. And hi, everybody. Just disregard everything Sean just said. What I'm really here to talk to you about is how to use shirtless bathroom selfies to maximize your reach on LinkedIn. No, that's not true. This is going to be a sort of a summary, a synopsis, an overview of some research that I did over the holidays into what is going on with your LinkedIn, because that was the question that I was seeking to answer myself. So without further ado, we'll dive right in. Quick introduction. This is me, or some vague approximation of me. I've been at Madison for about a year. Previously, I've had some time at Edelman, which is relevant to this conversation. I've been a reporter. I was working in philanthropy for some time and at the Department of Veterans Affairs. And yes, shockingly good singer is something that a colleague would put in there to make me embarrassed. So thank you for that. On to the next slide. About Madison, I think Sean sort of did most of this already, but I wanted to just double tap on a couple of things. We help professional services firms grow by making their partners and managing directors slightly famous, and we do that in a variety of different ways, but this is not the purpose of this call today. I just wanted to double tap on the authority marketing. That's a phrase that we use for sort of LinkedIn content marketing, LinkedIn engagement. And so that's what's most relevant here today. And right. So if your LinkedIn posts feel like they're reaching fewer people than they used to, you are correct. And it's because of some things that LinkedIn has been doing over the past year or two. And I'm going to try to explain what we best guess about these things, because it is somewhat of a black box, and LinkedIn is constantly a moving target in terms of what they're doing to their algorithm and this new AI tool that I'll talk about in a minute. But this is based on what we best know about how the algorithm works as of January of this year. Sean definitely covered all of these, but audience capture is real. We don't like to do the super viral stuff like the shirtless bathroom selfies, the sort of the strange walk and talks that everyone was doing on their commute on LinkedIn last year and then all of a sudden stopped, that sort of thing. We try to avoid being trendy while maximizing reach, I think is the way to think about this. Importantly, most leads are lurkers. This means that the people who you really want to be talking to, the people who are actually making purchasing decisions, are more likely to be consuming your content for months without ever publicly engaging with it than they are to be hitting that like button and commenting. It's just people in purchasing decisions often don't want to raise their hand in such an obvious way, we find. And
One other,
consistency,
just
yeah, sorry, go
one
ahead,
other
Sean.
note on that. Yeah, one other note on that is one of the things that a very common pattern we've seen both with ourselves and with our clients is when they do put time on your calendar and they hop on a call and you ask them like, hey, what prompted you to reach out? The most often thing we hear is some version of, hey, I've been following you for a while, for 6 months or 12 months or whatever it is, and just realized it was time to, have a conversation. They usually can't tell you which post did it. And they don't often remember even the specifics of it. They just remember that you said something that was interesting, that taught them something. And, they see your little face and your little headline and they start to associate you with somebody that can solve their problems. But it's that they put time on your calendar and say, oh, this was the specific post that did it for us. And so I think that's just important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then lastly, the point that Sean made previously about consistency trumping everything. It's just about showing up reliably, month after month and, not expecting posts to go viral and, understanding that, like we said before, most leads are lurkers, that showing up consistently will generate the results that you're looking for. But we do care about reach. And I want to get into a little bit more about how I differentiate reach from engagement and impressions a little later on. Unfortunately, reach is not a metric that can be tracked on LinkedIn. Let me just say quickly, reach is unique eyeballs on your content, as opposed to impressions, which are the number of times your content appears in the feed. And then engagement is obviously when people are directly contributing to your post through likes and comments and such and saves. And we'll get more into that. But let me show you first about where some of this data is coming from. This is a selection of the sources, went down some serious rabbit holes, but these are kind of the anchor reference points. Richard van der Blom is a Dutch analyst and consultant who has a lot of original research into LinkedIn. There's a couple of other people like him, but he's a representative sample on here. Social Insider, Buffer do their own research. Edelman, as I said, I used to work at Edelman, and I'm probably biased a bit, but I have very favorable impressions of their research output, both the thought leadership study that they do in conjunction with LinkedIn, and then separately also their trust barometer every year is always a must read for us. And then LinkedIn's, of course, own engineering disclosures. So that's kind of the bona fides or so of this research. Again, this is a synthesis of what's already out there. There's no original research in this, but I think for various reasons, LinkedIn and others don't do a great job of publicizing these changes. So the more people that can kind of shine a spotlight on this, the better, I think. Right. So moving on, key stat, at any given time, only 5% of your potential buyers are actively in market. That comes from an Australian think tank, the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, but has been picked up by LinkedIn's own B2B Institute as an important statistic that gives LinkedIn a good reason for being, but I think is important to note here. Of the ones who are in market, 81% go with the brand that comes to mind first, and that's from Bain. So the implication is that the question isn't how do I convert someone today? It's how do I make sure I'm the person that they are thinking of when they're ready, and that's what reach does. So we'll get on to some more evidence here. 58%, that's more than half of decision makers say that they've chosen to do business with a firm based on its thought leadership. And 61% are willing to pay more to work with a firm that articulates a clear vision. I think, obviously, thought leadership causes trust to go up and brand perception, obviously, as well. The key point here, again, from Edelman's research, and this is their term, not ours, but it double taps on something that Sean was talking about, is the people you're reaching with thought leadership are hidden decision makers. These are not the people that are signing the purchase order or the contract. These are the people who are listened to by the contract signer, and they find you through reading your LinkedIn stuff. So that's kind of the virtuous cycle here that we're trying to propagate. Big shift. This is kind of the meat of what we're talking about today. The easiest way to explain it is LinkedIn used to show your posts to people who know you, and now it shows your posts to people who it thinks will find them useful. So it's not just your friends and your contacts and your connections that are seeing your stuff. It's LinkedIn is making a determination about how to match content to interest. To do this, they built an internal AI system that they call 360 Brew. I can go into more detail offline about specifically the AI underpinnings of this system. But what it does essentially is it reads your content, it understands what you're writing about, and matches people based on their interests and their professional needs. I can get into more about the specifics of that, how it makes those matches in a bit. But the important point to note here is that it's not just delivering your content to your connections. And this is why generalists on LinkedIn are getting crushed in their content and niche experts are rewarded. There's a caveat to that as well, but let's go with that for now. Generalists generally are being punished, and people who can demonstrate clear niche expertise, their content is being promoted. And one of the first things this changes is how long your content stays alive on the platform. So the useful life of good content has increased. Essentially, posts used to last for 48 hours, 24 to 48 hour window. And now you can see posts continuing to get engagement and continuing to appear in feeds for 2 to 3 weeks. So what that means is essentially each piece has to do a little more work for longer. You can extend the lifespan as well by further commenting on your own posts. This is something that I probably need to practice as much as I preach, but there's plenty of evidence to show that if you can if you can, in addition to the content of the copy of the post, if you can keep some critical piece out or an interesting nugget, not just a restatement, but something else that contributes, commenting that 24 hours after the original post goes live will extend your reach by as much as 30%. So that's another little tactic that we can come back to. But the problem is that while content lives longer, it's getting in front of fewer eyeballs in the first place. So it's a 34 to 50% decline in organic reach year over year, but engagement is up. So the people who are seeing it are typically engaging more. Just to go back quickly to make sure that everyone's clear on these terminologies, reach is unique people who saw your post. Impressions is total views, including the same person seeing it twice. We care about reach because most of all, because it tells us how many different people we're getting in front of. That should be self-explanatory. But organic reach has dropped, engagement rates are up, smaller audiences seeing your content, and the people who see it are more engaged. That's good for some people. If you're an influencer, or a sort of a content creator who's seeking for maximum engagement over all things, then that trade-off could work. But if you're a professional services firm, what you want is the bigger denominator. You want to continue to stay visible to the maximum number of potential clients. So this is a problem if that's your objective. And if you remember, as we showed before, 95% of your future clients aren't ready to buy today. So if they can't see you, they can't build familiarity that converts later into warm prospects. Excuse me. So your profile is an algorithmic input. I think that most people are accustomed to thinking of their LinkedIn profile as being a version of their resume, which is sort of true, but it's more than that now. It's an input to the algorithm. It's the headline, your about section, the skills that you choose to highlight, and the endorsements on those skills. All of that comes together in a calculation that LinkedIn is making to decide whether you have authority on the topics that you are in fact posting about. So if your profile says just, managing partner and nothing else, you're not giving the algorithm enough context. And so it's not necessarily going to restrain the reach of or limit the reach of your posts, but you're not giving yourself the benefit of, providing to the algorithm your version of your expertise. So on the slide here, this is my profile. I suppose I should say that it's what an optimized profile should look like. There's definitely room for improvement. And in fact, you can't see my about section on here, but what I've tried to do in my about section is to weave in specific language that mirrors language that I'm using in the post that I write, with the understanding that LinkedIn can connect the two and give me an algorithmic boost. That's the thinking anyway. So I think this is probably the single fastest win for people on the call, is to look at your profile, look at your about page, your about section rather, look at your headline, and just ask yourself the question, does this communicate to LinkedIn itself, not just to people reading it, but to LinkedIn, what I'm an expert in? Expertise being above all else in algorithmic value.
One quick point on this, and this is your profile is ideally accomplishing a conversion goal and not just a reach goal. So you want to try to do both. From a conversion standpoint, I think the most important parts are probably your profile photo, the headline. So you see here, he says, I grow a professional services firm. So instead of saying, job title at company name, which is what a lot of people do, don't assume that they know what the company name is, and they don't assume that they know what your job title means. So actually try to communicate a benefit, like what is the outcome that you deliver for the people you're trying to serve in your headline, at least in the beginning. So, I mean, you can still say, marketing director or founder or whatever it is, but make sure you include a benefit statement and make sure people can see it on mobile specifically before it gets cut off. So you have more characters to work with than necessarily show up on mobile. And then the last bit is not related to reach necessarily, but I do think it allows you some latitude in terms of what you write about. It's called a custom button, and you need to have a premium profile to do it. But you see this little book an appointment call to action that he has on his profile there that allows us to, it's a bold blue link on mobile or in the activity feed in general. And so every single time you post, they see your little face, they see your little headline with a benefit statement, and then they see a call to action to book an appointment. And that is one reason why we say you don't really need to have a real strong CTA in the post itself often, because you already have the CTA up at the top. And so it just allows you to kind of focus on serving. So that last bit isn't a reach bit, but I do think it's important. If you're going to do the work of optimizing your profile anyway, you might as well tack that on and throw that in there. And from what we have seen in our testing, book an appointment has been the most effective. So.
Yeah. And then lastly, just connecting your profile language from your about page or about section to the posts that you're writing, to the extent, as I said before, that you can mirror that same language. So, if you've determined in your firm's messaging that one of the content pillars is that you're a fractional general counsel for Series A founders, for example, as a core theme, then you use that exact phrase in the post. Don't soften it by saying that you that you provide legal support to growing companies. Use the jargon matters, and it's a very fine line, because LinkedIn doesn't like very jargon heavy posts, but it's like it's almost like SEO. It's like using certain key phrases that appear in both your profile page and in your posts that LinkedIn can also refer to kind of how it understands your role. They build a model, like a persona AI, their AI model does. It'll build a persona for you and predict kind of, this is what we think that Sean is going to be writing about. And then to the extent that Sean deviates from that, there's a penalty until the model catches up and says, actually, Sean also writes about windsurfing, because as we all know, Sean's a big windsurfer. So that's all I think I wanted to say about the profile. 3 primary criteria that LinkedIn uses to determine visibility. Number 1 is dwell time. This is essentially how long people spend to read your post. LinkedIn measures this in 2 ways: how long the reader pauses on your post in their feed. I mean, while they're doom scrolling, how long they stop and look at yours, and then also how long they dwell on the post after clicking into it. This is LinkedIn's primary quality signal, and there are certain post types that we'll get into that can increase dwell time. Really, that's what you're seeking to do. Like any advertiser, you want to keep your eyeballs on your content for as long as possible. Saves. A save carries roughly 5 times the weight of a like. The point is that people want to come back to posts that get distributed further. So checklists, frameworks, any kind of sort of content upgrade, downloadable, anything that would sort of fit into that category would earn a save. And then the last piece, this is interesting. I did not expect to find this when I was doing the research, but the first 60 minutes of a post really can determine its life cycle. So if you post and then nothing happens, you get no click-throughs, no engagement whatsoever, there's a decent chance that your post will die on the vine. That essentially creates some weird incentives to do some things that LinkedIn also doesn't like, but we'll get into that later. But the idea here is that ideally your content would be engaging enough that you could generate some click-throughs and engagement and saves and such in the early stages, in the first 60 minutes or so. Yeah, we did that. Okay. So now this is all about, I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen, but we should have highlighted this on the slide. The more button here, this is what we're talking about. This little link is now one of the most important signals to the algorithm. And if somebody scrolls past your post and they don't click on the see more, then that's a good way to get your post killed by the algorithm. What that means is that the first 3 or so lines, about 210 characters, have to do a lot of work in getting the conversion to click through. And yes, that's, for journalists and people who are accustomed to writing in that style, having a punchy lead is old practice, but I find that the posts that perform best in this area are ones that really capture the essence of the entire post, the main thesis of the post in the lead itself. So don't have a punchy, fun lead like telling a story, and then the meat of the post, the message that you want to get taken away is 200 words down. Find a way to include it in that first 210 characters or so. Think of the see more button as a conversion event, and I think you'll start to write differently.
I do think here, this is one area where I think you'll see a lot of people abuse this idea. So there's there's copywriting principles, and people talk a lot about like compelling hooks and things like that. And there's a version of that that's like the cringy, I proposed to my fiance, here's 5 lessons about B2B sales or whatever. We have found that you can, even just something as simple as having the first sentence be what I am about to explain to you. So how to get reach on LinkedIn, can accomplish this goal for you, because you're to Jonathan's point, you're not burying things. You're communicating exactly what the value is that they're going to get out of that post if they read it. And so you can do this and accomplish this goal within the 200 character constraint without kind of then veering into cringe territory. So that just, I think, is important. You can read lots of posts where people talk about like headline formulas and books and things like that. And if it doesn't feel authentic to you, again, you can accomplish this in a way that I do think is authentic to you. It might require restructuring the post, though.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about this already, but LinkedIn, as I said, builds this what they call a topic authority profile, which is essentially an AI persona for you. It tracks what you post about over time, and then it uses that to decide kind of how much credibility to give your next post on that topic based on what you've written in the past. If you drift too far outside of what LinkedIn perceives as your lane, then the algorithm is going to apply what they call a deviation penalty. I don't know if that's a LinkedIn term or if that's in the research, but essentially that's what it is. Your distribution just drops as a result. The workaround here is sort of adjacency. So find topics that are adjacent to your core and then connect them through your expertise. This could be done like, you're writing about, you're a VC lawyer, you're writing about founder governance, and you're able to do both because they are adjacent topics. You're writing for funders and you're writing for fundees, but both topics need to be interconnected in some way. Then you can go sort of another concentric circle out, and you can say, well, I'm a firm that focuses on founder governance issues, but I'm also interested in posting about my process of growing a young business, a young firm. That is considered to be adjacent also, because it's part of your expertise is advancing. I mean, it's part of advancing your expertise. I feel like I'm not explaining that as well as I should be, but hopefully you're getting the general picture.
Yeah, there's a question here from Bill. So if he posts generally about financial planning and analysis. And today he was going to have a post about his phone didn't charge this morning because of a new setting. How do you kind of reconcile like the desire to kind of show up as a human who has a variety of interests, kind of with kind of reconciling the penalty here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the best answer that I can find is that it's a percentages, it's a ratio question. It's your human posts, your personal stuff should be something on the order of 15 to 25% of what you post. No more than that. We talk, I think, at Madison about like just enough humanity. I don't know, Sean, if that's still like how we think about this, but it's you don't want to inundate in a professional context people with your personality, but 15, 20%, something like that of your posts. That
Yeah, I
sounds
mean, I
fair,
think
Sean?
I think if you're okay with the trade-off of like there will be a penalty on that post, then and you're doing it kind of in service of a larger goal, then maybe that's okay. And that's a very and keep in mind these are also all levers, right? And so an example from us would be I post sometimes about celebration as a value of our firm. And we open a bottle of champagne and have a glass whenever we land a new client. That is a form of humanity that I think ties to, and I still reference, Madison kind of in the context of that. I think that because it has some other things, like it has a picture, that lends itself to that tends to be a positive variable. I think the fact that we're talking about something that is universally a universal truth can sometimes be helpful. It might have a penalty because of topic deviation, but it might be offset because of like the 24-hour engagement thing, that kind of thing. So these are all kind of levers, you know, but I think the high level point is you don't want to just be jumping all over the place, basically. I think you want to make sure that for the most part, like Jonathan said, we usually say 80% to, 80 to 90% of your stuff should be on topic. And then if you want to kind of interject some humanity, there's still value there because I do think people buy from people that they like. And so being charming and being winsome and not being an automaton, I do think is helpful. But, you know, not having that as an excuse to be, I'm just going to write about whatever I want on any given day. And just because it's going to be really hard for LinkedIn, I think, at an aggregate level to latch onto what it is that you're about too. So,
Yeah, I mean, it is possible to do this. I mean, I write about largely about matters of interest to professional services firms, just by the nature of the work that we do at Madison. But then also, I have a secondary interest because I am a veteran and I have a lot of experience working with veterans organizations on veterans issues. I sometimes like to, especially around Veterans Day and Memorial Day and certain times of the year, I like to write about veterans issues. And I don't see those posts get penalized. In fact, I probably have more credibility there than on professional services. But it is possible to thread that needle, but I think it's a trial and error thing. And like John said, in general, it's sort of trying to make sure that 80% of your posts are on topic. We are falling a bit behind, so I want to try to continue to push through. Oh, right. So let me just point to our example here. Mark Kane, he's an ex-Bain guy who runs a commercial due diligence firm. And every one of these posts that you see here is has been deemed in his lane by the algorithm. So private equity due diligence, building a consulting practice, and how to effectively run expert calls are, different topics, but related. And so that's why he's getting the kind of engagement. Well, it's one of the reasons he's getting the kind of engagement and impressions that he does. Let's see. Strategies for increased dwell time. This is fairly simple, but I just wanted to run down a quick list here. Carousels. You'll see more and more of these on LinkedIn now. The optimal type of this format is about 12 slides, and to use a vertical format so that it works on mobile. Every swipe on a carousel counts as an interaction that gives your content a boost. And so the type of thing that might be in a carousel, like say you're a tax advisory firm, here's 12 slides on 12 year-end questions every CFO should ask. And they don't have to be all hyper designed with lovely graphical elements. It can really just be mostly text on each slide, but they do work because they get engagement and the engagement drives reach. And some other post types that we find perform very well: checklists, decision trees. We've talked about these before. Savable content, due diligence questions, compliance checklists, evaluation frameworks, any kind of framework really if you can imagine somebody referring back to it on a recurring basis, then it's savable content. So that's what we're going for. Teardowns. This is something that if you went to business school, you'll be well familiar with, but you take a public artifact like a regulatory filing or a court ruling or a deal structure, and you analyze it and break it down and criticize it and compliment it and that sort of thing. Do all of that in public. Substantive analysis, that's sort of the same thing, or birds of a feather, but LinkedIn has a specific phrase for this. They call it nuanced text, and it's what allows you to get away with writing kind of more dense, jargon-heavy, longer posts. And actually posts that are done well in that model, rather than the kind of, LinkedIn haiku kind of stuff that you see a lot of the times. Posts that do the nuanced text stuff well, those are going to perform brilliantly. So that's sort of the desired endpoint there.
One note on this, like we get questions with newer clients, especially around, they'll notice that a lot of our posts tend to skew long. Like LinkedIn has a 3,000 character limit. We'll often bump up close to that number. And there is a belief that people don't read long posts. That's not true. People read boring posts. And so, again, as long as you can structure it in a way where you don't bury the lead, it does lend itself to like shorter paragraphs and things like that. But as long as what you're saying is interesting and you're adding value, one, like people will read it. And now we have evidence that it accomplishes two of these levers for reach in terms of one, increasing dwell time, and two, it's more likely that somebody's going to save a piece of content that you create that kind of goes in depth and gives you a list of things that might be actionable for them. It's probably more likely they're going to save something like that than the real short thing too. So it's picking off kind of two of those three levers there. So don't be afraid of length. Just make sure it's interesting.
Yeah. And remember that 75% of LinkedIn traffic now is on mobile. And so that changes how everything appears visually. That's I think the end reason why the LinkedIn haiku format has come into being, I think, is because people believe that shorter paragraphs are better. And I think shorter paragraphs are better, but most of what I'm seeing in that format are not paragraphs. It's just like sentence or half or sentence fragment, sentence fragment, sentence fragment. Anyway, moving on, because we are running out of time. And commenting. Now, this is not something I practice as much as I preach, but again, something that we know works is commenting on your post. We've talked about, but also engaging with commenters on your posts. Replying to comments on your own post boosts reach by roughly 30%. But the bigger deal is when you comment on other people's posts in your area of expertise. It'll update when you do that. LinkedIn updates its model of what you're an expert in. That updates that persona I keep coming back to, and it builds what it calls an interest graph. And the more posts in your space, in your expertise, in your niche that you comment on, the richer that interest graph gets, the better LinkedIn can understand you. And so that's why people say when you post on don't post and ghost, post and then immediately go and find some relevant content to comment on. When you do comments of 10 words or more carry a lot more weight than just, hey, great post, Sean, or whatever. And there's I don't necessarily endorse this. I haven't tried it enough to really believe it. But one thing that I saw come up repeatedly in my research was this formula called CEA. Compliment something specific, expand on the idea with your own perspective, and ask a question. And there is some evidence that I've seen that LinkedIn values those kinds of comments most of all. A few more practical things when we get to the end here. Format variety, just mix it up, carousel, text, photos. It's funny that probably the laziest thing that you can do to really get great engagement is multiple photo posts, not one photo, but multiple photos, because then people are clicking through. That counts as more engagement, and your post will get more reach. So it's a cheap trick, but if you happen to be posting a photo that is, there's a good reason for it, that you're doing it authentically, then why not post two? And let's see, video. We're not going to talk too much about video here, but it is growing. It's up about 53% year over year. Vertical video, if you're going to do video, make it short with captions so that people can watch it with the sound off. Do it vertical video because they're watching on mobile, and it's worth experimenting with. I put that as a goal for myself for this year, is to just experiment a little more with it. But if it's not you, then it's probably going to do more harm than good. So just, be careful for that. And we've got an example here from Greg, who's a good example of how to do this well. And when to post. This one's pretty simple. Midweek, in the mornings, in your audience's time zone. That said, my best post from last year, I think I posted on a Saturday. It was like, was it a Saturday? No, it was New Year's Eve, and there was nobody on the platform. And I guess LinkedIn was just looking for content to distribute. So if you feel like posting your master's thesis on a Saturday, you'll probably find a reader for it. So try experiment again here. But in general, Tuesday through Thursday in the morning. Things to avoid. This is really important. I want to make sure to underline this. Bounce back penalties are very real with external links. So if you include links in the body of your post, if someone clicks through to the link and actually takes time to read the article that you've posted, that's fine. You'll actually get a benefit into your reach for that. But if somebody clicks on a post that's in the body of your article, in the body of your post, and then they go through and then bounce right back, then you will get penalized. Engagement pods, this is sort of what is incentivized, I think, by that first hour rule. Like if you can't get some engagement on your stuff in the first hour, then your post might die on the vine. One way not to do this is engage, because they are detected by LinkedIn quite successfully, and they are prohibited, and you will get sort of shadow banned, penalized for weeks. And you don't have any clarity about when your time in the penalty box expires. So don't use engagement pods. What we mean by engagement pods is having arrangements with real people, not bots, real people, to, as soon as you post, they come in and they like your thing. Now, if it's an authentic, like I have alerts set up on my LinkedIn for when my colleagues post and for when my clients post, and I will typically make an effort to go in as soon as I see that and read the post, click through, like it. I don't typically comment, especially not on client posts, but that kind of engagement is fine. If it just feels like rote, like, oh, I got the alert, go in, like, didn't even read it, and then move on, LinkedIn will see that and they'll figure it out and they'll penalize you. Same thing with automation tools. There's a lot of automation tools out there that all offer this. You can submit the first comments, you can set up your colleagues to like your stuff. Do not do it. I'm telling you, they will always catch it like 100% of the time, and you will be penalized. Phrases, comment yes, tag someone who needs to see this, that sort of thing. Don't do that. That's gross. And you will get penalized for that too. AI content. Now, I don't know. I read somewhere from a reputable source that LinkedIn claims a 97% detection rate for AI generated content. I do not believe that at all. And the penalty, which I do believe, is a 50% reach cut. I don't know how good they are at detecting this content yet, but if they're not already good at it, they will be soon. And so what this means, the answer to the question that I'm anticipating here is, does that mean you never use AI to draft posts? AI as a drafting tool is fine, but the output has to be substantially rewritten by a human. It has to sound like you specifically, not like any random professional could have written it. And if you're successful in doing that and working with something that LinkedIn or that AI has written on your behalf, then that's fine. But don't just post. Please do not think that you can, as good as Claude is as a writer, you can't just post straight out of Claude, because you will get penalized. I feel like there's something else. Never mind. Okay. Recap, big wins. 3 things about how you show up. Optimize your profile, nail the first 3 lines, and rotate your format. 3 things about what you publish. Carousel first content, wherever possible, structured commenting around every post, and a 24-hour comment revival to your own posts to extend lifespan. And then one more thing about timing. We call this rapid authority. Some people call this newsjacking, which I think is a weird, gross term. But when something happens in your industry, be the person on LinkedIn who can explain it and what it means within the first 36 hours. And LinkedIn rewards expertise now more than ever. happily, that's what professional services firms are selling. And so if you do it right, you can really, I think a lot of professional services firms can really see a benefit under this new algorithmic regime, the new 360 that they're building. Yes, absolutely. Both, not only will the presentation be available as a follow-up, but I'm finishing up an article that I will make sure that everyone gets who's on this call. And that'll have the full research and the full source list and everything else.
Just to drill in on this real quick on the platform rewarding expertise. So, again, reach matters. Pay attention to reach. One of the things that we pay attention to that isn't necessarily reflected here because it's not directly a function of reach is what percentage of the people that are reading it fit your ideal client profile. And so, the tool that we'll use, we call it audience shaping, but we're not big cold prospecting folks. We just don't believe that that's a great way to build trust. But what we will do is we'll use those tools to build a lead list of people who fit your ICP and then use that as a mechanism to send connection requests. We don't try to slide into their DMs or get time on their calendar or anything like that. It's just about kind of inviting them into your world so that they see more of your stuff kind of going forward. But you're trying to serve a particular industry or a particular niche, having your content appear in front of 100 of those people who are perfect fit clients is probably better than you appearing in front of 1,000 people who are just random folks. And so I've acquired a lot of people in my own network over the years. In my former life, I was a startup guy and a venture guy. And that kind of was a reflection of, my audience was a reflection of that. I've transitioned, and so now I serve primarily professional services firms. And so I had to do the work of kind of shaping my audience accordingly. And so I would encourage you to think about that as well as you're doing that. It's not explicitly a reach thing in terms of pure number go up, but it is a thing about making sure that the right people are seeing my stuff as well. And obviously the LinkedIn algorithm is designed to help facilitate that, but there are some things that you can do to kind of take that into your own control as well. So.
Yeah, and that's basically it for us. This is not, again, the purpose of today's call, but if you are interested in having any conversations with us, we can think of 3 great ways that we could work with you and in ad hoc capacity on a short one-off deliverable. Authority marketing, as I said, is how we engage for our clients on LinkedIn. And then lastly, marketing in a box is your full service marketing team, probably your first marketing function if you're at that stage of growing your firm. So we would love to have those conversations with you, but also if you're just here for the LinkedIn content, then that's great too. Thank you everybody so much for your time. Sorry we ran a little bit long here, but are there any questions? If anybody who wants to stick around, we've got some time. All right. I guess
You did such a great job. So thorough.
That's right. Well, if there are questions, like I said, there's an article coming that will cover more of this in detail that I will make sure all of you get. And we'd love to stay in touch. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Oh, wait, it looks like we do get a question here. Oh, one of the challenges I have is, I don't know, Bill, Bill hopped.
Okay.
I guess we'll never know. He had a challenge. So,
all right. Thanks, everyone.
And yeah, appreciate it.